owns over 100 acres.
Okay.
The farm originally was owned by the Saul family, and so we got Saul Road. And they originally came from Cornwall, England, and they came in the 1850s. Their predecessor came about that time, built the house. They settled there, but they weren't the first people to settle there. This has been a property that's been important to indigenous people from far earlier times to now. And there's evidence of that on the property. It's dotted with effigy mounds.
Is there really?
Yeah, there's at least 5 or 6.
Wow.
And some are they're symbolic of, where if you're up on the bluff and you look down, you can see the pattern certain times of the year when the leaves are down. But you can see they're mapped, they're documented by State Historical Society. So there's a big story to tell. There's a grove of oak trees on Mike's property, and there's one at Sugarland itself, right in the center of where almost all the weddings occur. Almost all the vows are done under this huge oak tree that's 300-400 years old. And there's a grove of them across the way, and the feeling is that those may well have been intentionally placed because they form sort of a circle. And this, the Saul family reported at different times about, whenever they're out plowing ground, they're always turning up arrowheads, artifacts, different times. And this was, you might call it a very spiritual space, because it's a connecting point from 2 other spaces that were pretty important. Devil's Lake was a very symbolic and important location. Probably Madison as well.
Yeah.
And the lakes and the stuff that were there, uncovering these 1,000-year-old canoes.
Yeah.
They were old anyway. Yeah. So and you can get there west side of Madison. You can float down Black Earth Creek, and you can get by you kind of look at the waterways to see how these people moved around, because that was the easiest way. And so they could get from these places, and they would pass from Devil's Lake to Blue Mounds, the caves in Blue Mounds. And this pathway went through this land, and there were the bluffs to the west had stone protruding out, ledges. As the stone weathered, you had harder layers, and the softer below, and those got washed out by the creek over time. So they created natural shelters for people that are moving from a location to another, and or just settle there. They have natural cover. They're on a stream. They can fish. They can hunt. They have shelter. So this is a natural place for them to move through and to spend time at. Who knows? They might have had the same things happening there that we're talking about here, but in the terms of their time frame. Gathering place. So you could, I think, create an interesting experience that would involve going to visit these things in their place, and you learn real history. I mean, you can see this is what was here, and you can begin to understand how it worked for them. And I think for a lot of folks, that's what makes it symbolic, makes it important, and you can, and it takes them outside, takes them to a real place, a real life experience that they can then visually understand. You can even look at something, my background's in geology and hydrology.
Okay.
So I spent 24 years basically doing that, but most of it was in the environmental field. But you learn how topography evolves, why it looks like it does. And that's an interesting thing there, because you have hydraulics of the creek itself, and why does it look like it does? And you can see from the bluffs or from air photos, they can look down and they can see all these little oxbows that are former meanders of the stream. And a lot of people look at it and just say, well, they're like little tiny lakes in this valley. But they're there because this is how they form. You can teach people these things, and they'll grasp it really fast because they can see it in real, perspective. You can give them in your auditorium a presentation, and then go and see it, and it goes from being air photos and pictures in a classroom, and it becomes a tangible thing where they could put their hands in the water and feel it. So, also at some of these visits that Mike has set up, he has invited the local historical society.
Steve?
Steve. He is just a clever, entertaining person. Yeah, he's just so much fun to listen to. And he'll tell the story of Arena. And
which Steve is this?
Oh, Steve Harrington.
Harrington, okay.
Yeah, he's a big volunteer at the church on those garage sales and stuff they do.
Doesn't he live near Sugar River? He's just down the valley, isn't he?
He is actually, Steve and Tim they farm together, they're brothers.
Okay.
And they bought, the Saul farm was close to 400 acres before it was divided.
Okay.
And Mike bought part of it that was 100+ acres. Then there was another part that was 77. Anyway, it kind of got split up. But the two brothers, they bought part of the farm, and they farmed the land that is just north of the barn. There's a large irrigation thing out there, and that's part of the land. They manage about 400 acres. Tim does, and Steve together. So, at some of these earlier events, where we brought these parties into either the barn, we would do them there, or we would do it in Mike's building. Part of it would have asked Steve to give a presentation, as a president of the local historical society. And he's sort of a bridge or link between the precursors, might have been the indigenous people I was talking about, the Native Americans, and modern day. And he has maps that show Arena on regional maps before Madison existed, before other cities existed all around it, including Mazomanie. Because Mazomanie didn't come till like 1855, 56, when the railroad was pushing west from Madison to Prairie du Chien. And so, there's a lot of stories that can be woven. Like, I think Arena would be more when people were still doing river travel, but they were not wanderers and gatherers. They were traders, and they were makers of things. And so Arena was a trading base on the Wisconsin River. Arena didn't exist where it is. It was on the river. Several hundred years ago. And it moved to the railroad because who cared about the river anymore if you could travel by rail? So people moved their town a few miles to get to where they could connect to the rest of the world. And so the more that you can tell these stories with your feet on the ground and people looking at it, and they could say, oh, they were down by, I could see where they were by the landing on the river. There's some remnants of this or that. There's this little Dover was a community that pre-existed or was there before Mazomanie. And the railroad, when it moved out this way, was looking for they had to take on water about every 30 miles for steam engines. Because they're, water's getting blown out, the steam, and so they need to take on water. When they were building this line in the 1850s through this area, Black Earth was pre-existing, and the town of Dover was pre-existing. And Mazomanie didn't exist. And the railroad looked at these towns and said, I don't think this isn't gonna work out. And in some ways you can understand it when you look at Black Earth and sort of its culture or its history. It was all farming. It was, its name is Black Earth. Even now, what are they famous for? A shoebox, where you get boots. It's just, when there's something in it, it's their culture for going way, way, way back. And they weren't compatible with these guys that wanted to develop and didn't really care much about farming. They want to build a town. And so the town wasn't real receptive, or maybe they were suspicious or uncomfortable. So the railroad investors, being the entrepreneurs they were, said, we're going to build our own town. Our chief engineers figured out a way he can dam Black Earth Creek and create a water power source. And if we do that and integrate it into the building of the dike where the tracks are going to have to run anyway, we can dam the creeks and the water, and it forms an impoundment between the dike the tracks ran on and the bluffs on the east end of town. So it didn't take any energy to run it. Once you created it, you just had to let the water flow, collect it, and that's how the mill developed, was from that water power source. Yeah, it was going to be original. They looked at the woolen mills and cotton mills and finally found an investor out of Milwaukee who built a flour mill. And they put it there because they created this water source. Well, now they had a reason to build a town, and they built the depot. And all of this happened real fast. If you look at the date on the depot, it's 1857. The old feed mill was 1857. All of this happened just really fast. And they had the power to do it, and nobody was really regulating them. It was just, they're doing what they want to do as fast as they can. And so you can make a really exciting story out of all of that, where they can then understand why the feed mill is where it is, why the creek flows like it is. The remnant of the dam is still there. You can do it. You can walk right around it. You can walk over the top if you want. And come back around, and so you've got a whole story to tell with that I think people they go, wow, that's really something. And then you say, when you're all done, you can say, look, this was fascinating and interesting because we made it so. But it's nothing different than when you go home and you tell your own story to some visitor from other parts of the world. They're going to say, wow, that's really something what happened here. So when Mike is saying about, coming here, it's sort of unique in that you've created a situation and some people who understand human behavior and interests, and they're taking actions that are good for culture. They make people feel good helping in such endeavors. But what you can then take is to say this same thing can be done in many different places, and we have an international network of like-minded people around the world.
So now you're gonna come to this hub, but I want to learn their story now. Let's go learn their story.
Right. That's the sort of network I think Mike is talking about. You have just a unique thing. I think it was really smart of the school district to consolidate. Our kids went to these schools, and they're running around on buses all over the darn place. It's so complicated. On the long run, it probably wouldn't be sustainable. They're only there because they're stuck.
Yeah.
You know, because the schools were here, the communities couldn't necessarily agree or compromise. They finally did with the high school, and then they added the middle school. Finally, they beat everybody down and they got the grade school, all in one lot. It only took 50 years, you know, but they're all there.
At least 50.
Yeah, 65 is
Yeah.
when I think the school was
I
built.
was
Yeah.
gonna say. Yeah.
That's more than 50 years, isn't it? Yeah.
60
Um,
almost.
So, you know, it just kind of happened. And when this came up for sale, I had brought Mike and
Yeah.
Francois.
You work faster.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah, we looked.
and this is good. This is good.
Yeah, because we're
If
using it all
we-
the time.
if we
Actually, this
purchase
is
it.
better, yeah.
It is not that good because our resources are from around the world. So you know more about this, and you
Yep, we're embedded locally.
yes.
We're embedded locally, but now.
Yes.
being part of it.
So then just mention something amazing. I think he made a big contribution. So you see, we have so many resources. When the highest donor from India received her another degree at the University of Wisconsin, we invite her to visit the museum, the gallery of University of Wisconsin. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Mhm.
This when I conducted a research at University of Michigan Ann Arbor in 1997, I met with a professor at the Department of Linguistics. I asked him for some advice, and he said, "Don't reinvent the wheel. We need to stand on a giant so that we can see more.
Yeah.
So we need to do the same thing here. We have so many resources."
Well, I just appreciated all the pieces you put together and sharing that bigger story.
Sure.
And going back to your area of expertise, I think this area of Wisconsin has so much to offer in terms
Right.
of
The
geography.
Griffiths,
And,
you're
yeah.
right on the
It's
Ice
just
Age Trail.
incredible. Yeah, it's just
I
incredible.
mean, it's in Cross Plains. You could go, there's so many different stories that are all pretty fascinating that,
Really are close by.
yeah, well, and I mean, what Mike has said about the university is, there's so many, the State Historical Society is just building its brand, you know, consolidating all this stuff. You'll be able to go look at one of these canoes that they, you know, brought up out of Lake Monona or Mendota. And that, I mean, that'd be a great day trip.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
couple of different day trips
Yes.
to Madison and stuff around Madison.
Do you imagine a lot of, you know, with what you're envisioning, would a lot of the folks who would be coming, would that be, they're coming to Chicago first, and then as part of their larger visit there, they come up to Wisconsin for whatever thing is being
Right.
offered.
I
right?
think
Is
if-
that kind of,
There's the layers I would envision is a little bit like Mike is doing right now with his son
Yes.
and his children. His son is a chip maker, right? I
Oh
mean,
yes.
He's in
My son works at the top high chip making company in Taiwan,
Okay.
and they have more than 12,000 engineers.
12,000 engineers.
Yes, and
yeah, and then
That's
there's
not
all
like
the
anybody else. Yeah.
there's only one. We have more. So there's a reason why President Joe Biden asked the leader of China not to take risk.
Yeah,
That's very important.
yeah, it is.
This is a very good statement. They need to listen. Otherwise, the world will go back to maybe at least 30 years. That's not good. And also, one of the top companies has invested the money in Wisconsin. So we can also invite them to visit his company here.
Is that
Near
Foxconn?
Yes,
That's Chinese.
94. I went there when I learned about the news. I could be the first. I saw only grace there, but now they are something. So we have so many things to offer. And you mentioned Chicago. Actually, they need to come here directly.
Okay.
If they want to visit Chicago, fine. We can invite them to go to, not too far away.
Yeah, no.
Take
Only
a
2
bus,
hours.
Couple hours.
2 hours. They need to come here to learn about what they will expect. Give them some briefing. Give them the ideas about this headquarters. They take part in some big venture. And also we have International Lion University. Lions like to have some positions. We can invite representative of their country, maybe 3 or 5, even more than 30 representatives. Like India, they have so many lions. They would like to have some position. So they will have position, they will have the mission to come here to get trained. So that working together is very important. We give them this kind of rationale, this kind of vision, this kind of resources, and they would love to come here. We mentioned that we need to think about something like, do we want to go to India only for one day stay?
Right.
No, right?
Right. No.
Yeah, well, I mean, would you envision most of the folks who are coming, that would they probably be staying in Madison for a week, and
Yes.
there's a number of spots and they're hitting different things? Is that kind of the idea?
Yes.
Okay, and so you'd probably, so from your side of it, are you aligning? Would you be aligning with a hotel or something in
Yes,
particular? Or?
we need to also prepare.
Yeah.
That was my question. Is Dan, have you and Mike had any conversation about lodging in particular?
Right. Lodging becomes really important,
Yeah.
and I don't know of any hotels here in Mazomanie. One of the options we've considered over time is that at Sugarland, while there's floodplain issues in that, most of the land that where the wedding barn and the houses are, those buildings are above the floodplain, but the land around them for the most part is not. But also, Sugarland, the business, it's called Sugarland Events, and then there's the real estate, is a different LLC,
Okay.
which is owned by the Hines family. So that property is now for sale. Our partner, Bobby and Joy Hines, own the property, and they also joined with Nancy and I in the feed mill in evolving this wedding barn. They had bought the property. Bobby's wife Joy grew up, and the Harrington brothers that I mentioned are her nephews.
Oh, wow.
Her father was anyway. The family has lived in the area, and a story that she would tell that really was a fascinating thing that you don't understand or appreciate in the beginning, but when she was a little girl, well, she grew up just down the road from this, and this was a mill site there were 2 mills in the area. There was this one, and there was the one at Sugarland.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there's a dam, there's remnants of the dam are still there, and the foundation for the structure, it was like a 2-story salt box. And it sat right on the creek. We've got photos of when the lake was there, people out fishing, you know. So, I mean, that's a whole story unto itself,
Sure.
because you really, when you're there, you can see how it worked. And then the relationship between this mill here in town was more of a regional mill, because they would bring they would bring wheat berries, rye, and so on in from farms in the area,
Sure.
grind it, and then
that's-
load directly on rail cars. And there were, one of the times when the business went, every 20 years, some calamity would befall the owner, whether it be floods, fire. You know, there was an arson in turn of the century, 1899, New Year's Day. It was torched and burned to the ground.
Goodness.
Yep. And it's actually been, the original structure was what is now like the west end, the main. You can see there's a west end, which is 2/3 of the structure, and the east end, where the main dining room is, had a precursor before this fire.
Okay.
Okay, the west end was built, so that's from 1856, 57. That's 2/3 of the building. And then an east end was built, which was larger and bigger than where the dining room is now. That structure was actually larger. And that went on, they did good, and then 1899 is when it got torched and burned. And then the west end, the stone remained. The worst fire was on the east end. The west end, the stone remained, and it was rebuilt by a fellow named Henry Kirk, who lived in this area, lives out in this valley where I live, for his family. But he came in, he rebuilt it, and then in 1907, there's a photograph in the feed mill at the Historical Society. There's a head-on collision of 2 trains right outside the corner of the building. And at that time, I mentioned there was originally a 3-story larger structure on the east end, and then it burned. So it wasn't there anymore. And I have photographs that show the rest of the mill after it had been rebuilt in 1900. This is 1906. And these locomotives are laying, like jammed into each other right in front of the building, the inside of what's now the dining room. Because it didn't exist at the time. Yeah, it disappeared in 1900. 1906, the train wreck went right into this building. Yeah, I mean, it would have gone through that.
Anything they'd redone.
Yeah, what a mess that would have been. And then about 1916 or 15, that addition was added where the dining room now is. And so the bed and breakfast was owned by one of the operators of the mill in like 1870s or so. Whenever it's like an Italianate kind of structure.
Yep.
So
Iron Horse.
yeah. So this fellow and his family lived there, and there's these stories of haunted kind of stories that have been collected over time of things people have seen, and different staff are far more sensitive to them than others. Nancy and I are never really seen much anything that we could do. Once you get maybe a prickly feeling or something, but not much. But some people it really has had effects on. So that's a kind of a series of stories, but the daughter that's believed to be, they refer to as the woman in the blue dress. And from all accounts, she was the daughter of the father that built the Italian, that structure.
Okay.
They had tragedy in their lives, and he lost his wife and he lost kids. There was, one of them got killed in the basement of the mill through an accident. And so there was tragedy to the family, and eventually he moved on. But his story is pretty well documented, and we've had customers who have seen this woman time and again, and she always looks, she's a woman in the blue dress. And then one of these stories had her, there was nobody at the host desk at the time. Somebody's come in, there's nobody there, and they end up getting sad. And nobody could figure out, you know, how did that happen? You know, that they ended up over here at the table, and they said, well, the host took us in. And somebody asked, well, how did she look like, you know, because we knew there was nobody there.
Yeah.
And said, well, she was a woman, she had a blue dress on, and she took us in the dining room and sat up. And, well, it's, when you hear those stories, it's kind of, you know, they're friendly
Right.
enough, you know.
Yeah.
They're friendly enough, whoever they might be or whatever they might be. And, you know, it's a fascinating story when you put the different documented kinds of experiences.
Yep.
You don't know why or how or these things, but they're fascinating. So there's just lots of stories to tell, and you just go from one to the next to the next.
So when they go back, they will go back with the storybook.
Yeah, honestly.
Very good. And also a certificate showing that they earned something here.
Sure.
And your amazing story can become some theater's favorite.
Right.
So I can invite a professor who is a playwright. I think he can come up with a play. And then we invite students to perform the play.
Oh, that'd be something.
Yeah, because the long history, interest history would be good for such a creation.
Mm-hmm.
I can invite him to take part in this project.
Right.
So we need to try to get people involved in our venture, and they would make more contributions.
Well, you know, the other things that you could tie to that are culturally significant, that are already in the area, and most of our customer base is either connected to Taliesin, visiting Taliesin, taking the tours and whatnot. And the even bigger part of customer base is